part of your responsibility is to go back and learn these names. Go to YouTube, type in Louis Bellson, type in Buddy Rich, type in Max Roach. Max Roach died a couple years ago. A brilliant player. When you hear him play now, even on YouTube or on his DVD that he put out many years ago, when you hear him play, you're gonna be blown away. You're gonna hear him play and say, I can't believe how great this guy's playing, and he's been dead for 4 years. And it was well in his 80s. This is going back to the 60s. When you hear what Louis Bellson did with double bass drum going back to the 1930s. Incredible. So what I say is, nothing is new. All we can do is express it in a different way. All the words that I'm using to speak to you are not new words. I'm just taking these words and putting them in a different order and expressing them to you. Now I want to play a little for you. And when I play, I never plan out what I'm going to play. We haven't even done a sound check here. We'll do it real fast before I play. But the point is, when I play, I want to play for you all these different types of ideas of drumming. But what I want to understand is that we came from somewhere. We came from these great players. And then before we came to drum set, there was marching drums. There was this incredible, military drumming concept that they would play on the snare drum and play these grooves and rudiments. David mentioned before, how many rudiments are there? And you mentioned 40. Very good. These 40 rudiments are the letters of the alphabet. It's what makes up our sentences. And the beginning of drums, those marching drum corps playing, when they put all those rudiments together and they played, all those patterns were then learned and put in the drum set. We have a great rudimental player here in this room today, Scott Atkins. He came up before as a representative for Sonar and Sabian, and he came up here and talked when Chris was here, and I always get a kick out of it. You look at him and say, well, here's the guy, Mr. Scott Atkins. He's a representative from Sonar and Sabian. Oh, that's good, and he's just talking about Chris, and they gave away a snare drum. Oh, that's nice. And then my point is, you don't know how good a player Scott is. Scott is a phenomenal player. Great drum set player. I've got some of his recordings. But a great snare drum player. And I want you to hear him play, because I want you to hear what Scott will do on the snare drum and open you up to hear how these rudiments are put together on an improvised piece. I said it before, Scott, I may call you up. Scott, would you come up here? Let's have a round of applause for Scott Atkins. Where's Scott? Scott, come here. I've never done it before, and you know I put you on the spot, and that's just how life is. Thank you so much. Have a seat. Just tune this up, see what you got. Okay. Just tap this. Yeah, some guys would have been here for 20 minutes tuning this thing up. Put this here now. Now, what I want you to, Scott, I want you just to, no time limit, just play what you feel. What was that link that you did with Steve Smith? What was that YouTube link? What was it called?
I think it's under Scott Atkins, Steve Smith in Calgary.
Okay, Scott Atkins and Steve Smith. Go to YouTube and type in Scott Atkins and Steve Smith. The great Steve Smith, the drummer, dear friend of mine, phenomenal player. Steve called up Scott and they did a thing with 2 snare drums together. I want you to hear Scott play. Scott, just play a little for us. We gave you a little taste. What was that piece you played with, Steve?
I was based on an Indian rhythmical piece based around conical, which is the vocalization of Indians from South, or rhythms from South India.
I don't know what the hell you just said. I don't know.
But the key is, everything I just played there started with a basic fundamental of rudiments, which has been mentioned so many times today, paradiddles. A lot of that was paradiddle phrasing. It's actually the very first rudiment I learned as a drum student, right at the very beginning. And my first drum teacher did something really cruel to me. He actually wrote out an entire line of paradiddle sticking, but all as quarter notes in a row, gave it to me one week and said, okay, go home and learn this sticky. And then I came back the next week, and totally went over my head. I didn't realize that a paradiddle was a grouping of 4 notes that just repeated and went hand to hand. So I was trying to learn it as right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. I thought there was some weird science to what he'd written out. I didn't understand it. It was 4 notes grouped together, and then the same thing off the left. So when he told me to keep going, I said, well, you stop there. He said, keep on playing the pattern. I said, well, you only wore it out for 4 bars. And then I finally glued in, oh, you know, it repeats. Okay, so it's the same thing off the right and the left. So then, after learning single paradiddles, I learned double paradiddles, which Chris talked about in that Steve Gadd tune, where he's playing double paradiddles between the ride cymbal and the snare drum. And then triple paradiddles and paradiddle diddles. I mean, those are all rudiments that you learn when you learn to drum. So there's a great new video that just got released by Hudson Music. Benny grabbed the language of drumming. Has anybody had a chance to check some of this out yet? It's brand new.
Got it.
And one thing that he talks about in this video that really relates to what I was doing is he talks about a system of language drumming as being, you know, how many notes you can fit in a certain space and where you can play on that, which note you can play on within the bar. So if you have a bar of 16th notes, 4 groups of 4 notes, you can play on the first note, the second note, third note, fourth note, so on. And then you can double up and play on 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4. Well, these are all the same things I learned as a young rudimental drummer. I started when I was about 10 years old. I joined a local drum corps in a small town, and the paradiddle was where it all started for me. So then it became, you know, how do I relate that? Because I really wanted to learn drum set too. So I was studying out of what books? Stick Control, Ted Reed Syncopation. So then somebody pointed me in the direction and said, open up the Ted Reed Syncopation book and take an accent pattern and learn how to play paradiddles on those accents. How many people are familiar with the Ted Reed Syncopation book? You've got, you know, patterns that go by in 4/4 time, and you're playing syncopations like stuff like that. So then my teacher said, well, try with paradiddles. So I didn't understand what he meant, and he showed me, and that became the basis for what I learned to play all kinds of different accent patterns just based around paradiddles. So I played that as and so on through, you know, page and page of this. So that combined with stick control gave me a large vocabulary of sticking patterns. And of course, as I grew up in the drum corps environment, how many people are familiar with competitive drum and bugle corps out here? A couple people? Go to vicfirth.com and check out some of the marching stuff that's going on with the marching bands in the United States and the competitive drum and bugle corps. I mean, it's at a level that's it's unbelievable. And when the question was asked about how many rudiments there are, actually there's more hybrid rudiments being created every month right now. I wouldn't even guess to say how many rudiments there are. But it's a lot of fun to really dig into this stuff and learn new sticking patterns. And the thing is, drum corps, competitive drum corps has evolved from the point where it was traditionally military-based, where you had traditional pieces that you learned studying rudimental drumming, not just in drum corps, but if you study rudimental drumming, you study pieces like The Downfall of Paris that taught you march-type rudiment-based pieces that you would learn. But the problem is now, competitive drum corps, they're playing so many notes at tempos unheard of before, and they're not just marching in a straight line down the street. They're going in every different direction. They're pushing the envelope by taking tempos up to 180, 190, 200 beats a minute. So a lot of things like sextuplets got replaced by double stroke 6/8 rolls. So you can play it at that tempo. So now drum corps are marching along those tempos.